All right, welcome back to the course, week 2 here. So today we are talking about how to avoid some common fat loss mistakes. The common things, the most common things I see that stall people's fat loss within the first couple of weeks. And just to touch it back to this quickly, this is what we're working through here with the course. Today, again, we're just troubleshooting common fat loss mistakes. If you missed week 1, that's really the foundation. So if you haven't watched week 1 yet, go back and watch that. That'll help you lay a very solid foundation for what we're going to talk about today. And like we talked about week 1, education is really the foundation to all of this. So if you don't have this foundational education around your nutrition that I gave you in week 1, you're going to be very lost here. You're not going to get the results you want out of this course. So if you haven't watched it, go back, watch week 1. That said, let's go ahead and get right into it. So many diets create rapid change in the first 2 weeks, and then people will see stalls rather quickly. And often this leads to people assuming that they need to cut calories right away, and really can lead to a very vicious cycle of undereating and overeating. Because if you're making all the mistakes that we're about to talk about coming up in this course, in this lesson, you're going to be cutting calories a lot because your progress is going to be stalling a lot. So pretty quickly you get to this point which is where many people are when they start coaching with me, where you're only eating like 1,000 calories, you're really damn hungry, so you can only maintain that for so long. You overeat, you feel bad, then you undereat again, and we kind of fall into this vicious cycle, and that in itself can be the thing that's stalling your fat loss. So the goal with this is to help you avoid that, and the reality is cutting calories is generally the last thing you need to do when your fat loss stalls. Truly, for my clients, we have this whole flowchart of things we work through first before we decrease your calorie intake, which is this guy right here. And again, this is really what the basis of today's lesson is about. We're really going to be working through most of this. But just like last week with the nutrition hierarchy, we need a very clear order of operations here. If we're just willy-nilly trying to figure out what's impacting our fat loss, you won't really know where to go. And again, you're more likely to just cut calories unnecessarily. With anybody that I work with, the goal is always to keep you eating as much as possible so you can enjoy your life. These results will be more sustainable. You can have the best hormones, the best metabolism possible. Keep building as much lean muscle and feeling great at the gym as possible while still achieving your fat loss goals. So being very analytical, almost OCD about how we attack fat loss stalls like this is important. So first and foremost, you need to figure out if you're really even stalled. So the first thing we need to look at, which is why it's so important that we track metrics, and we're going to talk about this more in just a second, has your average body weight decreased in the last 3 weeks? So I have all my clients, and everybody doing this course has a tracker. I have all my clients take their weight at least 3 times a week. Many people, the scale messes with their head because they only weigh themselves once a week or even once a month. And so there's all these crazy fluctuations. Truly, your scale weight can be affected by so many different things. How was your training yesterday? Do you have an extra intense training session? Did you eat more salt yesterday than normal? Are you more stressed? Did you sleep less? How's your digestion right now? All these different things can cause these wild fluctuations in the scale. So sometimes you'll have a really good measurement if you're super attached to the scale. Sometimes you'll have a really bad measurement. But if we take weight more consistently, at least 3 times a week, we can really see the average. And with my clients, I tell them, don't at all be attached to these fluctuations every day or every other day. All we're looking for is an average downward trend across weeks and months. So first and foremost, we want to see, has your weight decreased in the last 2 weeks? Also, have your measurements decreased in the last 2 weeks? Regardless if weight has decreased or not, and I would argue for most people, seeing the measurements decrease is going to be a lot more important than the weight decreasing. And we're going to talk about this client here, which is one of my former online clients. But for most people, because often when people start coaching, when people first get their nutrition on point and your training on point, you're going to be building lean muscle and losing body fat at the same time. So therefore, our weight, we're adding weight via muscle, we're losing weight via fat, so our weight can stay very similar, but measurements will change a lot. And also, where has hunger been at is a very good indicator of whether you're actually eating fewer calories than you're burning in a day or not. I typically tell people your hunger should be in a diet about a 2.5 to 3.5 out of 5. So if you were losing fat and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, you're just not hungry at all, and all these other factors we talked about, movement has been consistent, sleep has been good, you've been consistent tracking, then your measurement accuracy is likely off. There's probably likely some new food you've introduced that's creating more measurement error. Because hunger shouldn't just suddenly see a drastic decrease. So that's a good one to look at too. But likewise, if hunger has been consistently high, and it's not a thing where like 5 days out of the week you've been really hungry and then you just smash food 2 days out of the week, but all throughout the week hunger has been high and you've been on point, that's likely a good sign that you're still making progress and we don't need to adjust yet. And again, this is why it's so important to track all these metrics like we do in coaching. So this is Progress Tracker. All my online clients use this, and this is actually that client in the last slide. This is her tracker. So across the course of 26 weeks, she only lost 6 pounds. So if that was the only thing we looked at, her progress is moving at a snail's pace. But if we look back, she got shredded. She crushed it. Which is why again, we need to take multiple metrics. Weight, body measurements are huge. Again, you all have this exact tracker. I'll track your progress every week. That's what I have my fat loss clients do. This is the basis for making adjustments. And again, like we talked about, a lot of things can affect your weight. So if your weight isn't moving, look, has your stress been higher? Have you been eating saltier meals than normal? Has your sleep been worse? Has digestion been off? How can we attack that and try to get those things improved and then see if weight will decrease? Now, again, when we're taking measurements, often we'll see, okay, even though weight didn't move, measurements did, so you're in a good place, you're still making progress. The reality is, fat loss stalls due to metabolic adaptation very slowly. So metabolic adaptation is the process of basically your body's getting smaller, you're eating less, you're moving less, and it takes fewer calories to move your smaller body. So this is a fat loss stall from metabolic adaptation. That's a fat loss stall that actually would require a decrease in calories or an increase in movement. But the thing is, if you last week made great progress and this week you made none, that's not metabolic adaptation. Our body adapts very slowly. So basically like this, your fat loss will slowly stall and then stop altogether. It's not going to happen in the course of 1 to 2 weeks. So if a couple weeks ago or last week you saw a ton of progress and this week your progress just stopped, that's a good sign that something else is off and you don't just need to decrease calories. So don't ever jump the gun when decreasing calories is the biggest takeaway here. So first and foremost, are you consistently hitting your macros or calories of protein or the handful diet? These same rules apply no matter which diet structure you're following. None of this works without consistency, which is also why accountability is so important, which is why you are all working with coaches right now. Accountability breeds consistency. So first and foremost, are you missing entire meals or days from your food log? If you're not tracking all the food you're consuming, then you're going to have a very hard time seeing the results that you want. We just have to be consistent with that. Planning ahead is really one of the biggest keys to all of this. And I push all of my nutrition clients, especially my new nutrition clients, to plan their day out the night before in MyFitnessPal, or if you're using the handful diet again, just plan out what you want your diet structure to look like. I typically tell people, if you had a business, if you're an entrepreneur, and you want to absolutely crush it with business, you're not going to go into your plan, or you're not going to go into your day or your week without a very structured plan for exactly what you want to do. But people often go into their nutrition, they go into the day just kind of winging it and hoping everything works out at the end of the day. And it very rarely works like that. I hold all my new clients accountable to literally every night for the first couple weeks they start coaching, planning everything out and shooting it to me so we can make sure you have a plan in place. And honestly, hitting your nutrition goals always comes down to planning. If you're not hitting your goals, just assume that you haven't planned and prepared enough. So to plan out a day of nutrition, it's honestly pretty simple. And once you do this a couple times, it'll be second nature to you. But first and foremost, just decide how many meals work best for you. I found that most of my clients feel best with 3 to 4, but really whatever works best for you, I would say anywhere from 2 to 6 is perfectly fine. From there, first you want to choose your protein sources to go with each meal. So basically, look at your total protein intake. So say we know you need to eat 200 grams of protein and you like to eat 4 meals per day. So we know, okay, I need to get about 50 grams of protein at each meal. So from there, start plugging in protein sources for each meal, adjust until you have 50 grams at each. You can adjust portion sizes or do multiple protein sources at each meal, but just make sure you have your protein split relatively evenly across the course of the day. From there, we've already hit protein goal. So that's perfect. Like we talked about, outside of calories, that's the most important thing that we get in for fat loss. So from there, I would plug in whatever carb sources you want to pair with each meal. And I would really, like we talked about last week, for satiety, to keep you full on the diet and make it easier to stick to, make sure we're getting lots of fiber, which is why we're planning carbs first. So again, basically just think lots of fruits, lots of veggies. It's smart to pair one of those with each of your meals. So from there, you'll have, okay, I know, like, let's say for lunch, I'm having stir-fried meat, so that's my protein source. I'm gonna have some beef. Then I'm gonna pair that with some stir-fried veggies as a carb source. That's great. And then finally, we're gonna work in some fats to fill your remaining calories. Now we plan fats last because often protein sources are also gonna have some fat in them, but this is a pretty simple way to plan out your entire day. And from there, you can really just kind of use that as a template. You can just tweak it slightly, but this is a very simple way to plan your day ahead of time. And I can't emphasize enough how much of a difference this will make if you're having trouble hitting your nutrition goals. From there, we need to make sure that you're actually measuring your food accurately. So outside of problems with consistency, people just straight up not tracking every day or skipping meals. This is the most important, or the most common thing that stalls people's fat loss, not actually measuring food accurately. And this is the most often where we'll see people start coaching and they say, hey, I'm only eating 800 calories and I still can't lose fat. What is going on here? Most often, people aren't measuring food as accurately as you think. And the reality is, this is something that at the start is kind of a pain in the ass. But I typically tell people it's not as much as kind of tracking for years and never really getting the results you want. So if you take the time up front for just a couple weeks to learn how to measure food accurately, learn what portion sizes are like, it'll pay off because the rest of your life you'll have a lot easier time creating the body that you want. Now, we also need to make sure, and we're going to talk about measuring food accurately a little bit more in just a second, but we also need to make sure that your calories, your macros, or your handful diet portions aren't all over the place. So if we're constantly kind of all over the map like you see here, it's very hard to make adjustments from. So if there's a huge variance of the calories you eat day to day, or even if the hand-sized portions that you eat day to day, we don't really have a consistent baseline that we can make adjustments from. So it's hard to predict how any adjustment that we make to your food intake is actually going to impact your body. So, taking it back to measuring food accurately, and really this is the most common reason why people's diets don't work, like we mentioned. Some tools that help a ton when it comes to tracking accurately, and the handful diet is kind of excluded from this because, again, there we're just using your hands. So there I would just say, if you are using the handful diet, don't bullshit yourself. Don't overestimate your hand size. Be very real with yourself on what your portion sizes actually are. If you're tracking calories or protein or macros, a food scale, a set of measuring cups, a set of teaspoons and tablespoons are very helpful because truly we're typically pretty terrible at estimating our food intake accurately. Most of us, and again, it's not anything like we're intentionally trying to be deceitful, most of us just unintentionally will way underestimate how much food we eat. And they actually did a study where it even showed that dietitians underestimated their calorie intake pretty drastically. So again, don't at all feel bad if this makes you realize that you have been doing this. It's super common, which is exactly why you're watching this course, to be educated. So, the most common tracking mistakes. Like we talked about before, estimating instead of measuring portions makes a massive difference. So, we want to make sure that when we're measuring our food, we're not using estimations like in MyFitnessPal, you'll see like one large steak, for example, or a super common one is with ground beef. It's just like generic ground beef, and we don't have like, okay, is this 80% or is this 93%? Because there's a massive difference in calories there. Or like a large steak is another super common one I see. A large bowl of rice. We want to first and foremost measure our portion sizes. So scale measurements are going to be the most accurate. So if you really want to get a true feel for portion sizes, as much as possible, I would use a food scale, at least for a couple weeks. Again, this is going to teach you a ton. And with things like meats, which are smart to weigh raw and plug into MyFitnessPal as such, or things like peanut butter. Peanut butter is another super common one, very calorically dense. And it's super easy to underestimate how many calories we eat via peanut butter. And from there, or like almonds are another good example of things that is actually smart to weigh, because the portion size is a lot different than what you'd expect. So basically very fat dense foods or fattier foods in general, it's especially important here that we make sure that we're weighing them. And the less calorically dense a food is, the less important it is that we are getting super OCD with how we're measuring it. So for example, a bag of spinach is like 20 calories. So it's very, very hard for you to accidentally overeat by like 500 calories in spinach. But it is a lot easier to do that via peanut butter. So the more calorically dense food is, the more we want to be precise with our measurements here. And straight up forgetting things like calories from cooking oils and condiments is another super common thing I see. Cooking oil especially is the most common one, so many people just pour some olive oil in the pan and guesstimate it. It takes an extra maybe 5 seconds, if that, to pour a tablespoon of olive oil into the tablespoon, dump it into the pan. But that can literally save you across the course of a week 700 calories. I literally just had a client this last week that this was the thing that caused her fat loss to resume. She wasn't measuring her olive oil. So that makes a big difference. And then different things like dressings, toppings, condiments. So think like the ranch on your salad, barbecue sauce, butter. All these things are sneaky high in calories and can literally over the course of the day add up to 1,000 calories plus. Just make sure you're taking them into account. Similarly with like little nibbles, tastes, and bites. If you're snacking on half a cookie, just a couple spoonfuls of peanut butter, it all adds up. So just make sure you take that into account. Inconsistency. We've already touched on this a bit, so I'm not going to go too deep here. Make sure you're not missing entire days or entire meals. None of this is going to work if you're not consistent. And then getting too flexible. So we always want to make sure that most of your food intake is whole foods. Again, part of this being a flexible lifestyle is having the ability to go out to enjoy some drinks occasionally, things like that. But if that turns into like 60 to 70% of your intake, the reality is if you didn't cook a food, you have no idea what went into it. So often, another thing that I see is, and we talked about this actually being one of the pitfalls that people typically run into when they start tracking just calories and protein. When most of your food intake is food that you didn't prepare, there's again a ton of room for error sneaking in. That's another thing that can cause people fat loss and stall. So I often tell people in situations like this, let's take it back to very simple, almost like quote unquote grow food. So think like chicken, rice, lean ground beef, lean steak, things like that that are very easy to measure, as opposed to a meal that you get at a restaurant that has 20 different ingredients that you couldn't possibly account for all of them. Are you eating filling foods? So right here we have something called the satiety index, which basically just tells us how filling a bunch of different foods are for you. This is something that I focus on a ton with my clients. My whole nutrition practice is built around this idea that one of the biggest flaws in the diet industry is we just rely on, okay, I'm going to be okay with being really, really hungry for the next 12 weeks and I'm going to get lean, which might work. But after that, when the diet is over and you're still really hungry, you're going to want to eat, you're going to gain it all right back, which is why so many people yo-yo up and down. So if we don't teach people how to prioritize filling foods, eat very satiating foods, you're always going to have this struggle. So one of the biggest things I focus on with my clients is, like we talked about before, just building all your meals around lean protein and fiber. the two most filling foods. And if you make these a priority throughout your day, through all your meals, you're literally going to be so full it'll be hard for you to overeat. Now, granted, when we're getting leaner and leaner, you'll still be hungrier, but again, this is going to make it a lot more challenging to overeat than it would be if you were eating, say, 50 to 60% highly processed foods that are literally designed to digest very quickly and make you crave more. We call those hyperpalatable foods. So if most of your food intake is, if 80 to 90% of your food intake is whole foods, and again, we have this foundation of protein and fiber, it's going to be much harder for you to overeat, which is why this is the biggest difference maker for most people. And then just be, with that other 10 to 20%, just be strategic. Save it for times when you're really going to take a lot of value from it. So for most people, I say like, during the middle of the week, it doesn't really make sense for you to like eat pizza at your work desk by yourself. Like, nothing at all wrong with pizza, but it is a lot more calorically dense, and you're not really going to think about it. You're going to be stressed, you're going to be focusing on work, you're not going to enjoy that. Why not just eat a whole food and save that for the weekend? You can be present with a significant other. Kind of a different tangent, but think about that and prioritize filling foods. And finally, are you consistent with your daily movement? So NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is the biggest difference in the metabolisms of lean and obese individuals. So basically, the components of your metabolism, or how you burn calories, we have resting metabolic rate, which is pretty much the calories your body burns at rest. We can't really do a lot to change this. We have calories burned via thermic effect of food, which is just the calories you burn actually digesting the food that you eat. Eating more protein helps here, which is another big reason we put emphasis on protein. But again, we can't really manipulate this a ton, because if you're trying to lose fat, it doesn't make sense to, hey, let's try to increase the thermic effect of food by having you eat way more food. We have calories burned via exercise, which is actually for most people about a puny 5%, which is why if you've ever tried to burn it off, it doesn't work. And then we have non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This varies a lot and is by far the most controllable aspect of your metabolism. So as we diet, your body is subconsciously going to reduce your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. As many of you have probably noticed, your body doesn't necessarily want to lose fat. So we have these defense mechanisms to, as we eat less calories, to kind of keep our body in a comfortable place and avoid fat loss. One of those is you'll subconsciously reduce movement. So all these little different things like blinking, fidgeting, pacing, stuff you don't really think about, you'll do less and less of that. And over the course of the day, that accounts for a lot less calories burned. So if you're not consistently hitting a daily movement goal, then we'll get in a very frustrating place where you're eating less, but also without realizing you reduce movement. So you're burning fewer calories and you're still not losing fat. So while I can't tell you, make sure you blink 6,000 times today, we can hit a daily step goal. This is a thing that a lot of coaches don't account for, which is very, very important and a big part of why my clients get such good results. We just make sure that you're very consistent with your daily movement. For most people, 8,000, 10,000 steps per day is a pretty realistic target without taking away from the rest of your life. But just look at where you're averaging right now. If you don't have something like a Fitbit or Apple Watch, you can literally look on your iPhone. There's tons of apps you can download to see what your daily movement is, and just try to add 1,000, 2,000 from there, and just ramp up to whatever's sustainable for you. And again, this is the biggest variable between the metabolisms of lean and obese individuals. This is a study, this is from James Krieger. He didn't do the study, but basically they found that this can impact your caloric expenditure over the course of a day by up to 2,000 calories. It makes a huge difference. So it's very important that we're also taking this into account. All right, so we're going to get into this part of it in week 4, so we're not going to address that right now. But the reality is 95% of the time when fat loss stalls, you don't need to decrease your calories. First and foremost, we want to make sure that you're actually stalled. We want to make sure that you're measuring food accurately and consistently. We want to make sure that you're hitting your movement goals consistently. And then finally, be patient. If it's only been 3 days, only been a week, don't adjust. At the bare minimum, wait 2 weeks before adjusting any of this. All right, and that is all I have for you all today. So your homework is to just drop any questions or any struggles you're having with the diet in the comments below, and we'll get them answered on the live on April 2nd. All right, guys, I hope this was valuable. I hope you took a ton from this. And again, just make sure you're asking any questions so we can make sure we're giving you as much value as possible from this.